Coming up on Arirang News. Hospitals are being paralyzed, with nearly 2/3 of South Korea's trainee doctors having joined the protest against the government's medical reform. We take a look at what the doctors are arguing for and why the government is not backing down. President Yoon declares 2024 the beginning of a new leap forward for South Korea's nuclear power sector, pledging to create $2.5 billion worth of projects. From South Korea's miraculous economic and democratic developments to overseas immigrant support for Korean independence movements from afar, we visit a special exhibition where young ambassadors promote the country together with 7 million overseas Koreans. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We start with the continued doctor strike here in South Korea. Patients are at risk, with nearly 2/3 of the country's trainee doctors having submitted resignations and thousands having left their places of work. Our Ryu Hyun-jin takes a look at what they're arguing for and why the government is not backing down.
The nationwide doctor strike continued on Thursday with over 9,000 trainee doctors, more than 74% of the country's interns and residents, submitting letters of resignation. Out of these, over 8,000 have not shown up for work. The government remains firm in its stance that it will take strong measures, including license suspensions and legal action, against those who do not comply with the return to work orders. Those taking part in the strike are arguing that South Korea, facing a shrinking population, already has a sufficient number of doctors with a high standard of medical service. They say enhancing the working environment for physicians through better pay or exploring methods to better allocate them so that certain areas of medicine do not experience a lack of doctors should come first. However, the government says the quota expansion is to better tackle the healthcare disparity that exists between the capital and areas outside it. Then how severe is this disparity?
The situation is extremely serious, not only in rural areas, but also in metropolitan areas like Incheon. Small hospitals and public medical institutions are facing even more severe shortages to the extent that they can't hire doctors no matter how much they advertise. So some departments are unable to operate at all.
At Incheon Medical Center, where Professor Jo also acts as the chief director, there are 39 working doctors, but it needs 45. He says increasing the number of doctors is crucial, but more needs to be done.
I believe that it's crucial to not only increase the number of doctors, but also ensure they're placed in essential medical fields and in regions that need them, creating favorable conditions to attract dedicated physicians.
With more doctors not showing up to work each day, Professor Jo says they should engage in dialogue with the government and come up with some sort of agreement. Ryu Hyun-jin, Arirang News.
Shifting gears, President Yoon declares 2024 the beginning of a new leap forward for South Korea's nuclear power sector. He promises new projects worth billions of dollars as he visits the city of Changwon, which he calls the center of the country's nuclear industry. Our presidential office correspondent Oh Soo-young has the details.
South Korea expects to create $2.5 billion worth of nuclear power projects with aggressive state support and regulatory change to promote the industry as an export cash cow. On Thursday, President Yoon held the 14th round of policy discussions with non-government panels and citizens to discuss ways to promote the nuclear power sector, to ramp up local jobs and boost livelihoods. Yoon stressed the need to transition to zero carbon for both energy and economic security, particularly as South Korea's advanced tech industries rely on a colossal amount of energy. Declaring 2024 as the start of a new leap forward for the nuclear sector, the president said some $2.5 billion worth of projects will be supplied, as well as extra financing worth $750 million.
정부는 원전 산업의 정상화를 넘어서 올해를 원전 재도약의 원년으로 만들기 위해 전폭 지원을 펼칠 것입니다. 계약만 하는 것이 아니고 먼저 선지급을 통해서 기업들이 숨을 쉴 수 있도록 할 것입니다. 또 조세 특례 제한법 시행령을 개정해서 원전 제조를 위한 시설 투자나 연구 개발도 세제 혜택 대상에 포함시킬 것입니다.
To create a stable ecosystem that's globally competitive, the government will invest over $3 billion in research and development to support firms and universities carrying out cutting-edge innovation, particularly as South Korea looks to develop homegrown small module reactors. Yoon also pledged to enact a special law to back the sustainable growth of the industry and produce a mid to long-term plan for 2050 to achieve carbon neutrality, calling the city of Changwon the heart of the nation's nuclear industry. Yoon said the government will loosen land use regulations to allow factories to be built, promoting convergence of the nuclear and defense industries in particular. To attract young people to the city to work and live, the president said a cultural centre will be built, as well as attractive spots for leisure. Also, the administration will create a corporate innovation park on gov't Island, just off the south coast, as a base for the cultural, arts, digital and biomedical industries. Having reversed the previous administration's nuclear phase-out policy, the government says Korean firms have procured over $3 billion worth of overseas orders to build nuclear power plants during this current government, 6 times what was accumulated during the last administration. In line with Yoon's policy, the nation's nuclear power operator has been aiming to win overseas orders to build 10 nuclear reactors by the year 2030. 오수영, Arirang News.
On the economic front, South Korea's central bank says it's not the time for a rate cut yet. The Bank of Korea holds its key rate steady at 3.5% once again to keep inflation in check. Our finance correspondent Moon Hae-ryun explains.
South Korea's central bank kept its benchmark interest rate steady at 3.5% as widely expected. The decision was announced on Thursday following a monetary policy committee meeting.
Due to supply chain risks posed on global oil prices and continued high consumer costs, slowing inflation will not be easy. We believe that it is necessary to stabilize the inflation rate to the 2% level by maintaining monetary tightening for a sufficient period of time.
This is the 9th consecutive meeting that the BOK has decided to freeze the rate since it was raised to 3.5% in January last year, following 10 consecutive rate hikes in a bid to tackle inflation. Analysts say that there is little reason to rush the lowering of interest rates due to higher-than-targeted price hikes and continued growth in household debt. Last month, on-year growth in consumer prices fell to the 2% range for the first time in 6 months. But at 2.8%, it remains above the 2% target. It is also unlikely that the BOK will cut interest rates ahead of the United States, with the current key interest rate gap between the two countries at its largest ever at 2 percentage points. Local experts believe that the central bank could ease their monetary policy in the second half of the year, provided the Federal Reserve's pivot policy takes effect in June as currently predicted. Meanwhile, the BOK also maintained its economic growth outlook for this year at 2.1%, as well as the inflation forecast at 2.6% as set last November. A rebound in exports offset sluggish domestic demand, with the country seeing the biggest surge in overseas chip shipments in 6 years last month. The goods account surplus is projected to reach $52 billion this year, driven by the ongoing recovery in the semiconductor sector. But there is still a high level of uncertainty around economic conditions to come.
Right now, there seems to be an increased demand due to more demand because higher use of AI. But if the high interest rate in the United States continues longer than expected, then high-tech companies and AI companies may not make as much investment as expected in the latter part of the year, especially if the interest rate cut in the United States comes later than expected.
Going forward, the BOK says that it will continue to assess domestic and external economic uncertainties and maintain its restrictive policy stance until it is confident that inflation will converge with its target level. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
In other news, amid intensifying concerns about declining birth rates in South Korea, one company and its baby bonuses in particular are making the headlines. Our economics correspondent Lee Soo-jin tells us why.
One local company's efforts to address low birth rates are making headlines. Yoon Group, a construction company, last week paid a whopping 100 million won, or 75,000 US dollars, for every child that its employees have had since 2021 as a baby bonus. Bae Jun-bum, who has worked at Yoon Group for nearly a decade, became a father for the first time in August last year. The 100 million won he received as a baby bonus meant a lot to him because he, as do many others, had been worried about the high costs of raising a child in South Korea.
Costs of education and real estate are higher here in Korea. But now, thanks to the baby bonuses, colleagues around my age have started to plan for a baby and others are preparing for a second.
But the hefty baby bonus amount was not the only thing that has grabbed people's attention. It has come to light that both the company and the workers may have to pay a large amount of taxes because of the baby bonuses. If it's considered as part of the employee's income, an employee whose annual salary was originally around 50 million won, or around $37,000, will end up having to pay taxes amounting to around 38 million won. But the company will be able to receive tax deductions as employee income counts as a necessary business expense. If the baby bonuses are classed as a gift given by the company, the employee will only have to pay a gift tax rate of 10%, which will come to around 10 million won. The company, however, won't be able to receive the tax deductions. One tax expert said what the government should do is look at the baby bonuses given by the companies as a gift.
The entity receiving the bonus is the baby, which means that it should be seen as a gift. The tax law should also be revised so that the gift tax exemption amount is increased. That's the only way birth rates will go up.
As for the company, the expert said that the corporate tax law should be revised so that the baby bonuses are regarded as deductible business expenses.
Although financial incentives alone won't boost birth rates, making sure that these companies receive tax benefits will not only encourage even more companies to follow suit, but will provide a foundation for more policies in the future. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Today, young students were chosen to promote South Korea's stories of growth to people around the world. An exhibit celebrating the history of some 7 million overseas Koreans was also opened, displaying how they even supported their homeland from afar. Our Lee Si-hoo takes us to the site.
Young people from all over South Korea gathered in Seoul on Thursday, united by a common goal, to promote the country in collaboration with some 7 million overseas Koreans. The Overseas Koreans Agency, Yonhap News, and the Voluntary Agency Network of Korea, or VONK, jointly named 80 middle school to university students to serve as ambassadors to promote South Korea globally. Together, the young ambassadors will share South Korea's rich history and culture with Koreans and non-Koreans living abroad. They will also work to correct any misinformation about Korea online and offline. Lee Ki-chul, the commissioner of the Overseas Koreans Agency, in a celebratory speech, highlighted South Korea's miraculous growth since the end of the Korean War. He said Korea's distinguished achievements, especially in its economy and with democracy, were a testimonial of its own that could elevate the status of overseas Koreans.
Dear overseas Koreans, stronger together. Please don't forget that Korea is always next to you. Let's make a concerted effort for common prosperity between Korea and overseas Koreans, and the world peace and prosperity.
As part of promotional efforts, a special exhibit was also opened. On display at the National Museum of Korea are pictures and paintings depicting Koreans' immigration history, first dating back to 1902, when about 100 immigrants traveled from Incheon to Hawaii. The display shows how the immigrants supported the Korean independence movement from afar, donating their hard-earned money.
I think it's especially great that the exhibit shows the correct history of Korea to people from other countries. As an ambassador, I will share Korean history and culture with not only those in Vietnam, but also all around the world.
The special exhibit is open to the public and runs until the 27th. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
The first day of a two-day interpellation session was held in the National Assembly on Thursday. The ruling People Power Party addressed concerns raised by doctors' groups about a possible decrease in education quality due to the expansion of the medical school's quota. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo expressed confidence that schools can manage the increase without lowering quality, noting that the government has consulted with universities and experts on the matter. Questioned by the main opposition Democratic Party of Korea on North Korea, Han said the government has emphasized multiple times its openness to talks with Pyongyang. Another question and answer session is scheduled for Friday afternoon, this time related to the economy. South Korea's foreign ministry called in a senior Japanese diplomat on Thursday to protest an event in Japan held to highlight its territorial claim over Korea's Dokdo Island. The ministry summoned Taisuke Mibae, the deputy chief of mission at the Japanese embassy in Seoul, calling on Japan to abolish the annual event, which was attended by a high-level Japanese government official. It has made clear once again that Dokdo is the territory of South Korea, historically, geographically, and under international law, dismissing Japan's repeated claim. Top diplomats of South Korea and the U.S. will meet in Washington next week. Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol, who's currently visiting Brazil to take part in the G20 foreign ministers meeting, will travel to the U.S. to sit down for talks with his American counterpart, Antony Blinken. The two sides will likely discuss ways to strengthen bilateral cooperation on issues including economic security and extended deterrence against North Korea's nuclear threats. During his visit, Cho is also expected to ask the Biden administration to pay close attention to South Korean companies' concerns about the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS Act. And for the first time since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the European Union is slapping sanctions on North Korea for its role in advancing the Kremlin's aggression against Kyiv. An Sung-jin reports.
The European Union is to impose its first sanctions on North Korea in relation to the Ukraine-Russia war. The Belgian government, which currently holds the rotating EU presidency, announced on X, formerly Twitter, that the 27 EU members approved a 13th package of Ukraine-related sanctions against Russia on Wednesday. It added that it will be one of the most extensive sanctions packages approved by the EU. France 24 stated that the North Korean defense minister and a North Korean firm are reportedly to be added to the sanctions list for supporting the Russian military. Those on the list will be banned from traveling to the EU or doing business there. The EU has previously imposed sanctions on high-ranking North Korean officials for human rights violations and violations of UN Security Council resolutions, but this will be the first time regarding the war in Ukraine. North Korea has reportedly supplied munitions to Russia against Ukraine in return for satellite technology.
At least 24 ballistic missiles of allegedly North Korean origin were used during Russia's missile attacks on the territory of Ukraine.
The new listings will add 193 entities and individuals, mostly for helping Moscow procure weapons or for their involvement in kidnapping Ukrainian children. More details will be released after the package is officially approved on February 24th, which is the second anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Including the most recent sanctions, the EU's sanction list over Russian aggression in Ukraine will have more than 2,000 individuals and entities. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
In sports news, former Los Angeles Dodgers and Toronto Blue Jays pitcher Ryu Hyun-jin is returning to Korea after 10 years in Major League Baseball.
Ryu's former club in the KBO, the Hanwha Eagles, announced his return on Thursday. He signed an 8-year contract worth 17 billion Korean won, which is around 12.8 million US dollars. With this, he has become the highest paid player in the league's history. The 36-year-old started his professional baseball career with the Daejeon-based Eagles in 2006 and played for the team for 7 seasons before signing with the LA Dodgers. It's been 2 years since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Our Bae-eun-ji reached out to the resident head of the UN in Ukraine to shed light on the painful reality of people there and the calls for continued global solidarity. Take a listen.
This is what an apartment block in Kharkiv looked like after being hit by Russian missile strikes late last month. Since February 2022, thousands have been killed and millions have not been able to return to their homes. As of last month, nearly 3.7 million people remain displaced in Ukraine. And according to the UN Refugee Agency, almost 6.3 million people have crossed into neighboring countries. Denise Brown, the head of the United Nations in Ukraine, currently living in Kyiv, says the air raid sirens still go off a couple of times a day, but people seem to have grown used to them.
I think it's terrible what people can get used to. And Ukrainians, very calm, very, very calm. There's absolutely no panic that I see. My team is not panicked, but it's the stress of what is coming.
She says they've been delivering supplies to regions along the front lines 2 to 3 times a week, as those directly impacted by the war are in need of shelter, health services, bunkers for schools, and psychosocial support. She added nothing has improved, and although everyone is exhausted after 2 years, the Ukrainian people remain strong.
People are tired. It's very true that they are tired, but I don't see any faltering in their determination to stay in their homes and to continue. It's true that the people of Ukraine are very strong. People often say resilient, but it takes a toll. But I think not on the determination.
As the war enters its 3rd year and with the conflict between Israel and Gaza, there are concerns that the focus is slowly shifting away from Ukraine. And she says the most important thing that's needed from the international community is to not forget about the war-torn country.
So it's really important that governments, the member states of the United Nations, speak out about all these contexts and don't forget them, and don't forget Ukraine.
Bae-eun-ji, Arirang News.
The snow scene was beautiful, but extra caution was necessary on icy roads all day. Currently, all snow and rain have stopped in the Seoul metropolitan area, except for some parts of Gyeonggi-do province. However, snow seems to be continuing in areas on the East Coast areas, where a heavy snow warning remains in place. Up to 30 centimeters or more snow is predicted by tomorrow on the East Coast, where a lot of snow has already fallen over the last 3 days, and up to 15 in the mountainous areas of the East Coast of Gangwon-do and northeastern Gyeongsangbuk-do provinces. On the way to work tomorrow morning, there will be many icy roads with cold temperatures. Seoul will drop to minus figures, Daejeon 0 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 6 in Seoul and Gyeongju, Daejeon, Gwangju, Daegu, and Busan, 8 degrees Celsius. Snow and rain will continue until Sunday in Jeollanam-do province and on Jeju Island. For the time being, the morning temperatures will stay below 0. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Well, that is all for this newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 10 p.m. with the AI headline news. Take care.